It all began in a quiet suburban high school on what seemed like just another ordinary morning. The halls echoed with the usual chatter of students, the slamming of lockers, and the squeak of sneakers on polished floors. Teachers hurried to their classes, and groups of teenagers clustered in corners, whispering about homework, gossip, or weekend plans. But hidden behind the seemingly normal day was a cruelty brewing that would soon come to light. Among the many students in the school was a girl named Emily. She was 14 years old, small in stature, with big hazel eyes that seemed to hold both innocence and wisdom far beyond her years. Emily had been born with a condition that left her confined to a wheelchair. For her, getting to class meant navigating hallways with narrow turns, and lunch breaks meant sitting at the side of the cafeteria, often overlooked by others. She was intelligent, kind-hearted, and soft-spoken, the type of girl who loved reading books and daydreaming about adventures she couldn't physically take. But high school isn't always kind to those who are different. For Emily, that difference became a target. The bullies in her grade had noticed her quiet demeanor and vulnerability, and instead of showing kindness, they chose to exploit it. Among them were two boys, Jake and Ryan, who walked the halls with arrogance, always laughing at someone else's expense. They had power in numbers and thrived on the attention they received from others who were too afraid to stand up to them. That morning, as Emily rolled down the hall toward her classroom, clutching her books on her lap, the boys spotted her. Jake smirked at Ryan, nudging him as they approached. Without warning, Ryan stepped directly in front of Emily's wheelchair, blocking her path, while Jake came up from behind. Emily looked up nervously, her heart pounding, already sensing trouble. "Hey, watch where you're going, Wheels," Jake sneered, his words dripping with mockery. Emily tried to stay calm. "Please, I need to get to class." But instead of moving, Ryan shoved the side of her wheelchair. The sudden force caused Emily to lose her grip on her books, which scattered across the floor. And then, before she could react, Jake gave the back of her chair a hard push. Emily's wheelchair tipped slightly before righting itself, but the jolt was enough to send her forward. She gasped as she fell against the armrest, pain shooting through her side. The hallway fell silent for a moment, students pausing to watch. Some looked shocked, others uncomfortable, but none moved to help. Laughter broke the silence as Jake and Ryan high-fived, proud of their cruelty. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she tried to reach down for her books, her hands trembling. No one stepped forward, no one spoke up. She was left alone, humiliated in front of everyone. But among the silent crowd stood another girl. Her name was Aaliyah, a 15-year-old black girl with striking eyes and a presence that demanded attention. She wasn't the type to blend into the background. She was confident, outspoken, and fiercely protective of those she cared about. And though she didn't know Emily well, she had seen enough. In that moment, anger surged through her veins. She clenched her fists, her jaw tightening as she watched Emily struggle. But she didn't move just yet. She studied the scene, her eyes narrowing on Jake and Ryan, the so-called kings of the hallway. Aaliyah knew that stepping in would make her a target too, but she also knew something else: she couldn't stay silent. Emily eventually gathered what she could and continued on, her head bowed low, cheeks flushed with shame. The bullies walked off laughing, and the hallway slowly returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. But Aaliyah's heart was anything but calm. She made a decision then and there. 30 minutes. That was all it would take for her to change everything. Half an hour later, the bell rang for lunch, and the cafeteria filled with noise and chaos. Students gathered in groups, the air thick with chatter, laughter, and the occasional shout. Jake and Ryan strutted in, heading straight for their usual table at the center of the room, surrounded by their friends. They were loud, cracking jokes at others' expense, relishing in the attention they received. But what they didn't realize was that Aaliyah had been watching them the entire time, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. She spotted Emily sitting alone at a corner table, quietly eating her lunch, her eyes still red from earlier. The sight made Aaliyah's chest tighten. Aaliyah stood up, her tray shaking slightly in her hands, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She walked over to Emily first, placing her tray down beside her. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked gently. Emily looked up in surprise. Sure." Aaliyah gave her a small smile. "What those jerks did earlier. That wasn't okay, and I'm not letting them get away with it." Emily's eyes widened. "No, please, don't. They'll just hurt you too." But Aaliyah shook her head, her voice firm. "Sometimes, someone's gotta show them they can't push people around forever." Emily opened her mouth to protest again, but before she could, Aaliyah was already on her feet, heading straight toward the center of the cafeteria. The room was loud, but as she stopped in front of Jake and Ryan's table, her presence was commanding enough to make those nearby fall quiet. Jake looked up, annoyed. "What do you want?" Aaliyah crossed her arms, her eyes locked on his. "You think you're tough, picking on a girl in a wheelchair? That's what makes you feel big." Ryan scoffed. "Stay out of it, she's not your problem." Aaliyah leaned forward, her voice sharp as steel. "She's everyone's problem when you treat her like that. You're cowards. And today, you messed with the wrong person." The cafeteria grew quieter as more students turned to watch. The tension was palpable. Jake stood up, trying to tower over her, but Aaliyah didn't flinch. She stared him down, her voice rising so everyone could hear. "You want to knock someone down? Try me. Let's see if you can handle someone who can actually fight back." Gasps filled the room. Jake smirked, trying to play it cool. "You really wanna do this?" Aaliyah didn't back down. "I'm not scared of you. But you should be scared of the truth. Everyone here sees what you are. Bullies. Nothing more. And I'm done letting you get away with it." For the first time, Jake faltered. The crowd wasn't laughing. They weren't cheering him on. They were watching Aaliyah. Some even started murmuring in agreement. The power dynamic was shifting, and Jake could feel it. Ryan tried to interject, but Aaliyah turned to him with the same fierce glare. "You think this is funny? Picking on someone who can't fight back? How about you pick on me instead?" The cafeteria erupted, not in laughter, but in applause. Students clapped, cheered, and some even stood up. Aaliyah had done what no one else dared to do. She stood up to the bullies, and in doing so, she shattered their power. Jake and Ryan looked around, suddenly realizing they had lost the crowd. Their smirks faded as the weight of embarrassment settled on them. With nothing left to say, they grabbed their trays and stormed out of the cafeteria, humiliated. Aaliyah turned back, her chest heaving from the adrenaline. She looked toward Emily, who sat frozen in awe, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Aaliyah walked back to her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore, not as long as I'm here." The cafeteria was still buzzing, students whispering about what had just happened. But one thing was clear, the bullies had been dethroned, and Aaliyah had become a hero in the eyes of many. Word spread quickly throughout the school, and by the end of the day, everyone knew what had happened. Teachers heard about it, and even though Aaliyah had technically caused a disruption, many admired her courage. Jake and Ryan faced consequences for their behavior, and though they still had their pride, they could no longer walk the halls with the same unchecked arrogance. For Emily, everything changed. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't just the girl in the wheelchair everyone ignored. She was the girl who had someone fight for her, someone who believed she deserved respect. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. As for Aaliyah, she didn't see herself as a hero. She saw herself as someone who simply did what was right. But to Emily, and to so many others, she became a symbol of strength, proof that one person's courage can ignite change. And so, what began as a cruel act of bullying ended in a powerful lesson for everyone who witnessed it. Kindness is stronger than cruelty, courage louder than silence, and standing up for what's right can change not just one person's life, but an entire community. Because sometimes, all it takes is 30 minutes, and one brave soul, to shock the world.